How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, as our channel grows, we do get people from the outside looking in, and we have a great question sent our way that I would like to go ahead and devote a show to. My guest today is going to be Joe Pomponio, and we're going to be talking to people who have a loved one locked in either prison or jail. We're going to provide some advice on how they can better deal with the prison or jail in which their loved one is locked up in. Basically, building a relationship with the people that work at the facility and the people that have a loved one on the inside. Now, granted, guys, this is definitely a good topic because if we can get some of this stuff solved, it could make matters a little bit smoother when dealing with individuals who are calling in and just have concerns. And I think this is going to be a great topic. Again, my guest is Joe Pomponio, and we have 10 tips that we're going to provide. But real quick, before we go into our show, I just want to let you guys know I have 2 books on the market and a third one coming out really soon, probably in the very beginning of 2024. But if you guys haven't gotten it already, Inmate Manipulation Decoded is available. It is on Amazon. Link to it is in the description. And guys, that book, it just sells. It does what it's supposed to do. It provides great training on inmate manipulation. So if you guys haven't read it yet, I would advise you pick it up. Definitely good for those entering the field as well as those that have been in the field. And it's good for any capacity you serve in. So guys, check out Inmate Manipulation Decoded. And we also have my latest book by Blue 360 Media, How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. Guys, this book has tons of advice. The link to that is also in the description. It can only be bought from Blue 360 Media. I'm going to have another book coming out, as I mentioned, shortly at the beginning of next year. It's going to partner well with this book. Almost another 50 more tips that really just, I don't know, man. I'm trying to get full circle here, trying to cover all the concerns I could think of in an effort to get my legacy. That's the key, right? I mean, I'm learning all these things and I want to make sure I could solidify it. So after my 25 years, I didn't waste my time. I was able to pass the message, pass the torch. So guys, you got to get that book. That book will help you literally navigate a successful career in corrections. Let me get Joe. What up, Joe?
What's happening, brother?
Joe, today we're going to take a trip on the other side, see if we can help families who have a loved one locked up. And the reason why I think this is a good topic is I'd rather have them come to people who work in the profession than some of the other channels, which are run by inmates who really give advice that really may not be beneficial to how the facilities operate. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of sites out there that give a lot of bad information, and most of it's due out of anger or resentment. So yeah, I agree with you. I'd rather them come to the professionals and get the right advice.
Hey, Joe, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice of 29 years. And currently working in the jail division for our local sheriff's department and panel member here on Tier Talk.
All right, so just to let you know, we both have tons of experiences working directly with the inmate families. With that said, I'm an admin, so I do get a lot of phone calls coming in. And also, Joe, I mean, I know you have interactions or you had interactions with inmate families. What was the capacity?
Well, as a lieutenant, we would take a lot of especially after hours calls when duty warden wasn't on the unit. And sometimes they were emergent, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were routine calls, but nevertheless, they were concerns that needed solutions. And that's part of our job is to address concerns for the family members. We're not there just to deal with the offender population. And unfortunately, there are family members that have concerns that need addressing, and that's part of our job.
And I just want people to understand that we understand that, family members or loved ones do get locked up. There's a lot of people that work in the system that could have family members locked up or are motivated to work in the system because they've had family members locked up. So again, there is some level of empathy towards that. I just want people to know that the video today is an effort to smooth out those relationships and make sure that we're working together to solve whatever that concern may be. So again, these are 10 tips. Let's go right into them. So the first one is emergency contact. So what do I mean by that? So every time an inmate comes into the system, when they go through orientation, whether it's at the county jail or whether they wind up going to a state prison, they go through an orientation, and they should be approached by the facilitator of the orientation. So whatever department they could represent, it could come directly from custody, or it could come from someone from social services. And they do ask, who are your emergency contacts? Now, this is different than who you want to come visit you, who you want to go ahead and call. I mean, that's for an inmate. This is who is going to be in charge of any decisions that need to be made. And, if there's any immediate information that has to be provided, who can we call at the facility level? Now, granted, guys, emergency contacts are usually dictated, or should be dictated, by the inmate, because, again, you can't just say, well, I'm his mother, I'm his emergency contact. If the inmate doesn't want you as an emergency contact, you're not listed as the emergency contact, and we are bound by policy. I'm like, I'm sorry, man, I know you're his mother, and it would be great if you had a relationship with him in which you could be the emergency contact, but unfortunately, he hasn't listed you as an emergency contact. So granted, I could still listen to your concerns if there are concerns, but be wary. I may not be quick to call you back because, again, you are not the emergency contact. And I would advise, if you have a loved one in the facility, that you push for them to have an emergency contact that is related by blood, a next of kin, somebody that can actually make the decisions when it matters. So the primary emergency contact could be a mother, a sister, a brother, a father, whatever it is, a grandparent, someone that's related by blood. And then you can always have a secondary if you want, but I wouldn't agree with that. But if you want, as a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, the only problem with that is, one, they're not related by blood, and relationships may not last in prison. And if that inmate forgets to take that person off the list, we're going to be giving information to someone that really is not entitled to it. So having said that, make sure you work with your loved one to make sure that you establish who the emergency contact is, and also the main numbers they'll be calling from, because that's what we use to identify if that is the emergency contact or not. Like, you could say on the phone, well, I'm his mother and I'm listed as the emergency contact. Yeah, I know, but the number's not matching. You have to call me from the number that is in the system. So sometimes there could be a whole roundabout discussion. This is bull. It's like, yeah, but remember, I got to be very careful of who I'm talking to. I don't want to release information to someone that is not supposed to get that information. So we have a process. Are you the emergency contact? And is this the number that is identified as the emergency contact? Joe, I know you've dealt with a lot of people that call in that are not the emergency contact, and they get frustrated when we're not giving out information. They think we're hiding stuff, and I don't think that they realize that we can't just release information to anyone. It could be a reporter, it could be an enemy, someone that they don't get along with. So we have to make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's with that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We got to have a viable way to be able to identify the emergency contact, because, like you said, we don't want to give information to somebody who doesn't deserve it or need it. When they come in through our intake, our sociology department makes them fill out a list of immediate family members and such, addresses and phone numbers that they can remember. We primarily here use the emergency contact for medical issues and in case of critical illnesses and sudden illnesses or things of that nature. But again, when it comes to addressing just everyday general concerns, immediate family members who can actually identify themselves in accordance with our list that we have, addresses and phone numbers, and sometimes for visitation purposes, even driver's license numbers. But again, we want to make sure that you have something in place where we're giving the right information to the right person, and not to baby mama or your second girlfriend or whatever the case is, because primarily you should only have one emergency contact. You shouldn't have more than one emergency contact. Just because of the fact that at some point there's going to be a power struggle there between the two to see who's going to get the information.
I agree. And that's why we kind of have a primary, and we kind of I know it's unique. We say secondary, but technically it's the primary. But you have a lot of people that are no, I want it to be my girlfriend. I want it to be my boyfriend. Okay, you know what? We'll let them be a secondary. So whatever that means, take it as you want. But can you give me a family member, please? Because there could be times when we have to make a decision, and that's the person that can do it because they are related by blood. And granted, if there is no one that can be that emergency contact because you don't have a family member and you are looking for someone that maybe it is your girlfriend, whatever it is, because you don't keep in touch with your family, the inmate themselves have to be able to prove that they don't have a family member. I mean, they really got to exhaust every level. We'll look at a cousin, if need be, that they never spoke to for about a year. So remember, it's that important that they have that relationship by blood. And I want to add something, because Joe said something about visits. When you go into visits, obviously there's things that you have to bring in to identify who you are. A driver license would be key, a passport, government documents. If there are changes in your name or changes in an address, please let your loved one know that's in the prison so they can update it during that period of add and delete, because that's needed. Because if not, you go in, the name matches, but the address doesn't. There's a chance that you may not be seen. So I thought that was a little, or may not be allowed to visit. So I thought that was good advice from Joe. Keep that up to date. We're not being assholes. It's just that, again, guys, we have to be very careful of who we let in, not just for the safety of the facility, but for safety of your loved one. So actually, I wish people would understand that the harder it is to get information about your loved one, or the harder it is to see your loved one, is not a bad thing. It's an effort to protect. It's a good thing. I just wish they would see it that way. I'll let Joe go first on this one, but this matters to me. You got to remember your loved one's identifying number, the SBI number, or however the state or the agency does it. But Joe, how important is for the family member to know that number?
Well, I mean, it's very important, especially if you have a loved one with a common name, like Dennis Brown or Gary Johnson, or in a state such as Texas. I mean, hell, we could have probably 20,000 Gary Johnsons or Dennis Browns. Knowing your loved one's specific identification number is key. Especially for identification purposes, because we don't want to address the wrong inmate to the wrong family member, or vice versa. So as a good practice, and we tell offenders when they come in, once they go through the intake process, is to make sure. And of course, our website too, you can also look an inmate up and it'll give you their ID number. But, before then, we used to tell them, make sure you write your family, make sure you give them your correct address, give them your TDC number, or identification number. And this is something that they will need, just for identification purposes. Because like I said, if you have a loved one with a common name, Johnson, Brown, Good, White, it's crazy how many people that you have with the same name and same middle initial. You can't even trust the middle initials anymore, because middle initial, you may have some, 13 or 14 with the same middle initial. Then we're looking at date of birth. Then we're looking at this. Then we're looking at that. So you can alleviate all of that headache, and save yourself and the person that you're talking to some time by knowing your loved one's specific ID number.
I have another thing I could add, that people change their name in prison. They could go Muslim. They could change their name. They could. Some get married, change their last name. They go under a different name. This is, last time I was here, it was Joe Pomponio. Now I'm Anthony Gangi. So, but the SBI number is connected to identifying marks. They're connected to all this other things like the fingerprints and all this other stuff. So the SBI is always consistent. So when you know that SBI number, that's pretty much what's been given to you. I mean, that doesn't change. So knowing the SBI matters, because that's the identity that makes us more comfortable in knowing first. You definitely, know who this person is. At least that's a good starting point. But it gives us the right direction to know that we're looking at the right one. So that matters. So yeah, know that identifying number. Have that ready when you make a call or whatever it is. On the same topic, when sending mail, make sure that your address is legible, your name is legible. I mean, they could pretty much get mail from any place, but you need to be able to identify who that sender is, where that sending address is, and more importantly, when you're writing to the facility, we need to know who that inmate is, and we need to know that number. If the number is not next to the name, there's a good chance that mail is going to get returned back to sender. Or, you got to make sure that is filled out correctly so we can identify as best we can who it's being sent to and who it's being sent from. You would agree with that, Joe, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll be the first one to admit my handwriting sucks. On a good day, I look like a 3-year-old having a seizure when I'm writing something. And I can tell you from experience at the county jail level, especially when we're taking money orders to put commissary on inmates' books. If we can't read who the inmate is and we can't read who the sender is, we can't process that money order. And, when you bring us something, for a loved one to put on their books, we want to make sure that it gets put on their books. So, having particular information and making sure that it's legible. And again, trust me, I understand, folks. I have the worst handwriting, and anybody that knows me and see my handwriting will vouch for that. So if your handwriting's not legible, especially if you come to a county jail to put money on an offender's books, don't be afraid to ask for help. We'll be, and if we have to ask you, who the offender is and what your name and address is, don't be offended by it. It's because we need to make sure to cover our bases as well, to make sure that that money is going to the right person. And in retrospect, when you're writing to an offender at a state facility, we need to make sure that the sender of that letter is authorized. We need to be able to read the name due to the fact that, we need to make sure that it may be a domestic violence case he may be there on, and he may not be allowed to associate with this person that's writing the letter. He may, unauthorized contact with a victim of a crime. So we do, it's something that we need to ensure is happening, not just for us, but for you as well.
Now, a couple of these tips may bleed into each other a little bit, but we did kind of list them as separate, but they may bleed in. Joe had mentioned be receptive to policy and procedure. And when we talked about more of don't ask specialized treatment, but this may also connect with teacher loved one to utilize the in-house system to solve concerns. And also when we talked about mail. So let me just mention something here. So sometimes inmates feel that they can utilize their family to circumvent the system. And again, I get it. I mean, I'm not saying we're a perfect system, because we're not. Obviously, I'm not here going to say that we run perfectly and we're always right. That's not the case, nor am I trying to paint the picture that's the case. I mean, we're human, we're not perfect. Okay. But having said that, we have to make sure as loved ones that we're not continuing to motivate the inmate, the loved one that you have in prison, to not follow the chain of command and really kind of use you, who I'm sure on the outside you're busy, you got stuff going on, you got the pressures of, whatever they left behind that you have to maintain. And then, they may have a concern because, oh, you know what, I'm not getting my property. So, okay, well, I'm going to, mom or whatever, can you call up for me? And then you call up and then we're like, well, has he spoken to the officer? No. So they haven't gone through any chain of command. No. They haven't wrote it through JPay or the grievance system. No. Okay, so you got to be careful here, because you're going to wind up becoming an exhausted resource. And I wouldn't even say exhausted. I meant exhausted by you being tired, not exhausted as if that inmate's going through all the measures. But you're going to wind up being used when your best bet is really to empower the inmate to solve the matters themselves. I mean, that's why they're in prison and jail, so they don't act and they become more patient. I mean, that's the key. A lot of people that are locked up in prison and jails are very impulsive in their behaviors. So they want something and they want it now. And then when, you may tell them, hey, listen, this could take up to 30 days. I'll give you an example. Joe mentioned money going into someone's account. Once it gets received, it could take a few days. Property could take 30 days from one facility to another. After 30 days, okay, then, okay, let's look into it. But some of these inmates want it now. And instead of waiting the 30 days, they'll say, well, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and call my mom, or I'm going to call whatever. They're going to put pressure on. And admin should be saying, well, let me see. All right, well, he just got here today. So he's looking for his property. He just got here today. One thing is, he said he didn't have a change of clothes. Well, did he speak to the officer? Did he write anything? No. Okay, so ma'am, here's what I would do. I would go ahead, and next time you speak to him, tell him, hey, listen, when you have this concern, these are the routes that you could take, which, by the way, they're aware of those routes. They know the routes they could take, but they feel that in some cases, if I call my family will get things to move for me a bit quicker. Yeah, but it's not always the case. There's a time sometimes within the process of what they want. And therefore, loved ones should, okay, listen, you got to be patient because I talked to admin and policy here says 30 days for this, 30 days for that, whatever the policy is for what you need. So I would advise that you wait 30 days. And if nothing happens, then you could talk to your officer. You could talk to any one of the service providers that come to the unit, like social services, mental health, whoever, because they're all here to help. Or you could write it through the grievance system. But, again, you're going to call me every time you have a concern. And the problem is, let's say even by chance, we decide to bend the rules and say, you know what, we'll get it for him today. Well, what's going to happen? He's going to call you again tomorrow for something small that's supposed to take time. And now you're handling stuff on the outside, but you're doing everything he could for the inside. And you're not teaching him or her to kind of, take responsibility, empowered. And these are the ways that you're supposed to solve the matter. That to me is probably one of the most frustrating things when, the individual, the loved one, the inmate knows where they're at, how long things may take. They know the consequences of their actions. And then instead of following the proper chain or going through all these measures, they look to fast track it by calling their family in the hope that their families could speed track it. And administration is going to be like, no, because we do that for him. We got to do that for the other 2,000 that we have here. And that's just not, we're not, and I said specialized treatment. It's like, well, my love, ma'am, if I do that for your loved one, then I'm going to have to do that for every other person here. Because what's going to happen? We're going to do that for your loved one. And then he's going to tell all his peers, this is how I had it done. This is what I did. So if you call your family, administration is going to budge. So now all of a sudden, we're not even operating on policy and procedure no more. We're operating on external pressure, which really doesn't work well with the operations of the facility. Joe, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and one thing, one piece of advice I would, give to all the family members of loved ones that are incarcerated is educate yourself with the facilities, rules, and procedures. One thing I love about TDCJ is the fact that they're an open book when it comes to what rules and procedures are. They have them on the website. They have copies of the offender orientation handbook that family members can download and read, so they know exactly what is expected of them. And contrary to popular belief, jails and prisons are not, old A&E episodes of hard time. There are things that we give your loved ones every day. They get 3 meals a day. They get medical care. They get fresh clothes. And you talk about the inmates that use family members that to try to circumvent rules and procedures. That's one thing that if there's one of my pet peeves that pisses me off is inmates that use their family members to try to circumvent. I have one example a couple of weeks back. We have an inmate who was a constant crier and whiner. And, he's calling his mom 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 times a day because he's not getting his way. And here this poor lady is, this inmate's mother. She's in the process of trying to plan a funeral for her sister who just recently died. And she calls up to the facility and you can hear the tone in her voice. She's just wore slap out. She's just tired. And she's like, is there anything that you can do for him? And like we told her, I said, ma'am, you got to understand that, he's on restriction. So he's not going to get his property. Although we do allow them to give them, we'll let them have their hygiene, legal materials and, pen, paper, envelopes, stamps, so they can still communicate. But yeah, he's not going to get his property. He's not going to get, telephone calls. And she's like, he is just wearing me out with these phone calls. And, it was one of those things where at no time did he ever, speak to any of the staff or any of the administration or any of the ranking structure. But the one thing I do want family members to understand is that they're going to have their basic necessities no matter what. They're going to get 3 meals a day. They're going to get fresh clothes. They're going to get showers. They're going to get, hygiene. They're going to get ample opportunity to write letters, whatever the case may be. And, the best thing for family members to do is to learn about the facility, learn about the rules, procedures. If they have a handbook that's available for you to download, I suggest you download it and read it. Like I said, there's nothing that pisses me off more than an inmate that uses family members to try to circumvent policies and procedures and think that they're actually, it's going to change the outlook.
Yeah, and guys, listen. So again, for the family members, there are, as I said, things that they can utilize: the grievance system, the chain of command, the different departments that come and visit them on a daily basis. But if they keep on calling you and they keep on pestering you, all of a sudden you don't want to take the phone calls anymore. I mean, I wouldn't. Or I just, what? How am I going to end these phone calls? I'm going to have to call the facility, or else he's never going to stop calling. And then you're looking for the convenient measure that opens up the Pandora's box. I think you should be willing to not be afraid of conflict at first and set the tone. And who cares? It's like set the tone. Because if not, you open up that door and they will constantly call you. And the problem is you're running your own life. You've got your own things going on. And I dealt with a female recently who was so caring for her husband who was locked up, who's putting all these pressures on her, to help him because he has all these issues. And I'm telling her, hey, did you call the old buds person, whatever? Because, these are things he could do. Did he go to the grievance? I don't know. And then I'm finding out she's living out of her car. She's homeless. And he's got 3 meals a day, and she did turn herself around. It's amazing what she's doing now. Maybe one day I'll have her on the show. But, we contacted because she hit me up through the channel. And I said, listen, I get it. You love them, but your love has extreme sacrifices right now. You got kids out there. You're on the streets right now. And this person's inside the prison. At least he's guaranteed his meals. He has the resources in the prison to go ahead and solve his matters. So again, guys, just be wary, because sometimes in the convenience of not being bothered by the phone call, you want to rush things, but it's not the right thing. You can't do that, because again, I wish life was that easy. I wish I could go around saying yes all the time and life would be hunky-dory, but it won't be. The box opens, people expect more and more and more and more. And I started it all. I should have said no the first time. In our profession, and this could translate to those on the outside, you got to chase conflict. You got to be willing to tell people no, so you're not taken advantage of. Now, it doesn't mean you don't help them when it's needed. Of course, there's going to be times where you may have to be that voice. But, be wary. There's a lot of things that they could settle on their own, than, you having a call. It's like, oh, my son doesn't have toothpaste. Oh, did he talk to the officer? No, he gave me a call. Okay, well, could have talked to the officer. Why is he calling you when you're taking care of all these other things and he hasn't once made the effort inside the facility? Oh, you know why? Because you called last week for him for small things, and you called the week before. So he doesn't need to go to the chain of command, because that's another thing. One last thing. Well, we got more tips, but one last thing on this part. If they could circumvent the chain of command at any time, they will. So they know that the families could go ahead and maybe directly reach out to admin, and that alleviates the chain of command that's directly in front of them. You have to help us by, reminding him, hey, before I make these phone calls, did you try this route? Did you speak to the officer? Did you speak to the people that came on before? Come on, try to empower that person to do the right thing. And, and this way, God forbid, if there ever is an emergency, okay, well, now this warrants that type of energy. I get it, but you're wasting out your energy on things that they could be solving on their own. So just be wary. Sometimes in an effort to convenience ourselves, we may wind up putting ourselves into a Pandora's box where we make it worse. Sometimes that quick yes has long-term, consequences. All right. So this to me, these two tips may fall in line. I guess they all connect, but I guess we'll treat this one separately, but it's going to fall into the next one too. But people change in prison and jail. What do I mean by that? So yes, hopefully if they're following the systems, changes are for the good, but you have to realize something too. There's pressures in that environment from other inmates that, you may think that your loved one may be telling the truth or whatever it is because he's your loved one or she's your loved one. I get it. But they could be pressured by other inmates. And now your loved one is kind of like in survival mode. They're in desperation. And, now they're worried about, maybe what can happen. We have a lot of inmates that, let's say, gamble. They gamble and they wind up owing a lot of money. And then what they do is they tell their family, oh, by the way, the business office took, I don't know, they took something out for fines, which I shouldn't be paying for. So I'm arguing with the business office, but it drained my commissary. And, can you help me? And I need more money. And then some parents will blindly send the money and just say, well, yeah, of course, we want to make sure. I don't know why the business office take that amount of money. But then you get some families that call the business office. Why are you taking out? We didn't take out any money. What are you talking about? And later on, they either don't believe the business office. No, I always take the money. It's like, guys, we haven't taken the money. I have the statements here. What fines? What are you talking about? And they still won't believe it even when they see the statements. It's like, no, we haven't. And then later on, turns out you find out that, your loved one owed money gambling. Somehow he sent out a remit to someone on the streets so then they can go ahead and put the money back into the inmate's account. But Joe, when you said people change, maybe that was me. When we said people change in prison and jail, I mean, even if I had someone locked up, I would be very mindful of, yes, there is my loved one, and I'm talking to my loved one. I get it, but this is where the key advice is. I also have to understand the situation they're in and the pressures that they are facing, so I can understand who it is I'm really dealing with at that moment. Situations truly define who people are, and in prison and jail, these situations can be very scary, and you could be getting manipulated because, okay, well, this is my loved one, he needs these things. Yeah, but have you asked them why? And have you confirmed why? Why does he need more money? As an example. But Joe, what's your thoughts on people changing prison and jail?
Yeah, I mean, people become a product of their environment, and being in a prison environment should be a changing, event to somebody, a changing in the lifestyle, like we said, hopefully for the better. Sometimes it's not, and unfortunately, we do have offenders who like to gamble on baseball, football, basketball, NASCAR. It don't matter; they will find something to gamble on just because it's the nature of the beast. Because they're in a penitentiary full of men, B, because they're in a penitentiary full of men who watch sports, and, there's always got to be some sort of competition. With that said, if you're getting calls, 3-4 times a month saying that, we need more money because I'm out of toothpaste or because, I don't have any soap or you should start to question why, because, somebody doesn't go through, 12, 13 tubes of toothpaste in a month. I like to brush my teeth, but I'm not going to wear out that many tubes of toothpaste in a month. So, that should be a key indicator that something's going on, something to inquire about, and we've had them where, they gamble so bad and owed so much money that they called a family member on the phone and say, hey, I just got into it with so-and-so over here, man. I'm really scared. Next thing we know, the family member's calling up to the prison and telling us, hey, so-and-so just threatened my husband or my brother or my dad. So now we're having to lock somebody up to do a protection investigation. Come to find out, it was a gambling debt that he couldn't pay or wouldn't pay. So, unfortunately, the prison environment does change folks. Sometimes not for the good. You do have inmates that'll come in there and do their time, stay out of the way, and do their thing, and enroll themselves in classes and keep themselves busy to make the time pass and try to better themselves. But unfortunately, we do get offenders that do not follow that procedure and get themselves, into trouble, and they try to use their family members to help dig them out. And, the members, ultimately it's the family members who suffer because they're the ones that are sending money that they really can't afford to send in because they get bills of their own to pay.
Yep. And guys, even though we kind of led the specific example to money, whatever it is, I mean, that is usually the big thing. I mean, you got to look for patterns and then ask why. I mean, keep on asking why and exhaust all avenues before you start blindly just accepting what's being said. And granted, don't get me wrong. I mean, again, they could be truthful too, but, just be wary at any moment. They could be playing a game. And then once you provide that yes, and you give it to them, you could be caught up in a cycle where you should have said no to begin with, and they'd stop asking. And this kind of goes into be objective when you're trying to look into a concern. Be curious and not judgmental. Sometimes when you have a concern, you get the story from your loved one, and I get it. They're your loved one. There's no way they would lie to you. And then when you call to ask for assistance, you already have judgment in your heart. You're not asking out of curiosity. You're asking, and then when someone's trying to tell you, ma'am, I'm looking at the stuff right. Well, I don't believe you. It's like, well, you're questioning my integrity. I'm looking up the incident for you. This is what I got. Well, I know you're lying. I know you're not telling the truth. I know your officers are doing this. It's like, well, hold on, man. You asked me from my perspective. I'm looking at the reports. I'm looking at what's in front of me, and this is what I got. And now all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy. And it's like, well, wait a second. Maybe your loved one isn't telling you everything. So I think what would be better is if there is a concern, you work in partnership with the department you're calling, in this case, let's say it's administration, to try to see what the matter is, instead of getting the information and then just automatically attacking the information because it's being given by someone that you see as running the facility. I mean, we all have different roles. Administration is the liability side. Our job is to make sure we pick up all the pieces that have fell down, so we're not being sued for stupid stuff. So sometimes parents could give us good, or family members, loved ones could give us very good information that leads us to have to look into things that could be an eventual lawsuit. So, I mean, there could be a great partnership with us and the families. But having said that, the partnership is very hard to develop when there's no trust when the call is made. Are you asking me a question, or you're automatically assuming I'm lying? I mean, because at that point here, I think for me, once you start attacking my integrity, I no longer want to help you. It's just an automatic. I'm not going to get rude with you, but the dialogue is done. It's done. I'm not going to go back. I'm here trying to help you, and then automatically you're lying. Okay, then I'm done. If you don't want to believe me, I'm not going to go any further with the dialogue. Right now I'm trying to help you try to figure it out, but I want people to know sometimes the calls from the family could be beneficial if there is a concern that we have to look into, but you got to be objective. You can't go in with judgment. You got to go in with curiosity. Let's see if there's a matter, if there is a concern, if we could work in partnership to solve it. Joe, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the family members, again, contrary to popular, beliefs, that we're not barbaric. We strive to be problem solvers just as much as anybody else. And when family members call up, I've had some family members who are very understanding, very inquisitive, asked, and why. I've got no problem explaining the whys. And you have other family members that will call and right off the bat, you're on the defense. Being objective will help the conversation go a long way. There may be a rhyme or reason the way things are going. Unfortunately, sometimes offenders, tend to exaggerate the truth sometimes, and sometimes they'll just flat out lie for self gain. When we are discussing things with you, number one, we're doing it just just to be able to fill you in on our policies and procedures and why things aren't so instantaneous, and also to explain why things are the way they are. It could be a disciplinary issue. It could be a medical issue. People will call and say, hey, look, you guys haven't done anything for my husband, or haven't done anything for my son. He's in a cell hurting. Ma'am, as we speak, your son's out on the rec yard playing basketball. I'm sitting here watching him on my video camera, on my surveillance, watching him play basketball. So, apparently he's not that hurt, but I want to know what it is that he's claiming is hurt. So if that's the case, we can get him seen by medical. There are things that we can do, unofficially, to help put your mind at ease. But sometimes there are things that we have to do that take a little bit of time, and there's a process for it. So just be objective, and don't, I don't want to say be argumentative, but be understanding when you call, because there's two sides to every story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Yeah, and guys, just I want also get the names of the people that you're speaking with. Make sure you're dealing with the right department. Okay, so you may want to always call administration as the catch-all, and I get it, but even administration has their limitation. This kind of crosses into, guys, believe it or not, the last three tips can kind of cross in together. Get the names of the people you're speaking with, and make sure you're dealing with the right department. Understand the roles of each department, how the facility works, and then be empathetic. So this kind of all blends in, but real quick, when it comes to this, get the names of the people you're speaking with and make sure you're dealing with the right departments. Again, with this other thought, understand the roles of each department, how the facility works. Administration, we facilitate the needs of the facility. That's our job. We could direct you to where you got to go. We do have some oversight. But there are certain things that, all because we're administration, we may not have the direct answers to, or technically we can't get involved because, if you have an investigation going on, let's say with your loved one, administration can't get involved in that until the back end of it when it's done. We have to keep that objective. So people are like, well, if it's an investigation, I said you got to speak to the investigation division. Well, why can't we speak to you? Because it's not my investigation. I can't get involved in the due process. I can't give you out any information because I'm not the one that. I don't want to violate the due process of someone's hard work. You get the investigative division that's committing a lot of hard work, and then all of a sudden I could say the wrong thing and all their work becomes shit because I messed up, and I don't want to live with that. I'm sorry. I mean, these investigations could lead to criminal prosecutions, and at one point, someone has to be held accountable for whatever they're trying to investigate, and I'm not going to be responsible for minimizing or negating that process. So you got to understand the roles of the different departments, and this way, when you call, you kind of know who you got to speak to. So again, the facilities have multiple departments, social services, and, they handle a lot of stuff related to transition and, parts of rehabilitation. You have mental health, medical, and, these, if you have a specific concern, these are the departments you would like to talk to first, related to whatever those specific concerns are. And if you go to admin, it should only be because there has been exhaustive measures. Now, granted, when I say exhaustive measures, I'm hoping that there's exhaustive measures first from the person that's locked up. That would be key first. And if they're not going through the proper channels, okay, then you got to redirect them. Unless it's emergent, you should be redirecting them. Hey, you didn't go through all this stuff, because you'll have people like, well, they wrote to medical 20 times. Okay, ma'am, I have everything that's written to medical, and I got not one thing that they wrote to medical. So they haven't written the medical 20 times. Well, then the family make, well, because you guys aren't keeping proper record. Ma'am, it's a digital system. We don't have access to delete anything that's put into that digital system. We don't have, once something's in there, it's golden. It's there forever. So when we tell you the person hasn't put something in, it's 100% truth. The person has not put anything in. So again, there's as we talked about before, there's some procedures in play, but again, you got to know what those departments do, know what their role is, know what they're responsible for. So you can even ask, like, hey, my son has a concern. Is this the right department? I mean, a lot of people, what they may do, which has become it's a very resourceful department, but you don't want to overwhelm them either, is outside of admin, social services can also direct you. But they can direct you, but there are certain things that it's not within their wheelhouse to handle, but they do have an understanding of where you need to go because that's part of the service they provide. But if you have a problem with another department that's not under their supervision, they can't do anything. So it's like, well, I spoke to social services. They sent me over to mental health. Mental health's not handling my problem, so I'm calling social services, and they start yelling at social services. And sort of, hey, wait, ma'am, I know that your concern was related to mental health, and I forward you over to mental health. My involvement now is technically done. At this point here, you may want to go to administration, who may be able to help you. But remember, each department has their own function, and definitely within their own wheelhouse. So you don't want to push them to where you're trying to get them to operate out of their wheelhouse, because you got a lot of people that work in these departments that want to help you. And then what happens is when they can't help you, they get stressed out, they're just burnt out. They get disenfranchised because they feel they don't have any value, which, it's hard for them to realize, hey, it's not your fault. Here's the funny thing: the person that you're trying to go to for help that can't help you is working within the parameters of policy and procedure, and you are now putting pressure on that person to break out of policy and procedure. So the person that's in the wrong is the person who's pushing on this poor worker who wants to do the right thing, but you're trying to get that person to break policy. And then eventually what happens, that person is like, you know what? I'm not even going to bother, because no matter what I do, I can't solve it. To be honest with you, when you call these certain departments, I think when it's out of their wheelhouse, as long as they direct you to where you have to go, that's worth the thank you. Regardless of what the outcome is with that other department, if you have someone that says, hey, you know what, that's not in my wheelhouse, but I still know you need help, because you have some people that say, nope, that's not my wheelhouse, call back, boom. But then you get some people that say, you know what, that's not my wheelhouse, but you know what, let me go ahead and call mental health. Mental health may be able to help you. Give me a second. Boom, 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 mental health. Okay, thank you. I'll transfer it, ma'am. I'm going to transfer over to mental health. Wow, look what she did. Or look what that person did. They knew you needed help. They redirected you to the right department. But at that point, but then what happens here is that when they don't get the answer from the other department, they yell at the person that made the connection. Well, that's not that person's responsibility. That person connected you, but you're mad at them because you didn't get the answer you wanted from another department. So now you're burning a bridge with someone who's willing to help you. I think here's the thing. If I was a family member, guidance to me would be more important than the outcome at first. Guide me. What can I do to help solve these problems in a more long-term basis, not short-term? Not reactionary mode, but what can I do in long-term? Because I don't want to keep on getting these phone calls. I got a life to live on the outside. So what's the best way to do it? And then what we could do is provide you long-term direction in an effort to empower the individual behind the wall, so you're not overburdened with the stresses that they may be in a better position to handle. It's just they're borrowing on what they feel you have as influence, because you're able to directly call admin, and then you realize that the stuff you're asking for is rather superficial. And then it's like, well, have you done this? Well, I don't need to. I'm going to call you. And every time I call you, you solve it for me. Okay, well, when the person gets out and winds up, never taking on responsibility for their own efforts, well, it started when they could have been, when in prison they could have done it, but instead, you just, circumvented authority for them, so they never had to make any efforts. What's your thoughts on this, Joe, on understand the roles of each department?
Yeah, it's pretty integral. What the public needs to understand is, one person's not going to have all the answers. You got one person being a senior warden running a facility of, 2,000 to 3,000 inmates, with, possibly 300 to 400 employees, both uniform and contracted. So answers are going to take some investigation, and sometimes they take time. Knowing specific concerns, whether it's medical, educational, mental health, try to keep those as separate as you can, and combat them one at a time. Because of the fact that keeps us from having to bounce you from department to department. But, we want y'all to understand that, it's not a one person catch all, a one person contact. We have family members that try to contact the senior warden directly and address 2, 3, 4 concerns. And what happens from that point is the senior warden, makes his little notes, and he gives it to the major, says, Major, I need you to look into this and address this. The major sends it to the captain with a note, says, Captain, I want you to look into this and address this. And then ultimately, usually it just passes the buck. They'll send it to a lieutenant and say, Lieutenant, I need you to find out about this, address this, and get back with me, by tomorrow. So, when you have more than just one concern and you're trying to address multiple things, it kind of, it muddies the waters a little bit, and we have to get with multiple people, multiple departments to try to find out, all these answers. So if you have a multitude of concerns, the best thing to do is address them one at a time, because of the fact that, we can get you to that department and get you a specific answer then. The most common are medical needs. Hey, my husband was supposed to have an appointment. He hasn't heard anything. I'm trying to find out what the hell's going on. And the point, we can get with medical and, come to find out that he does have an appointment. He just doesn't know he has an appointment, due to security concerns. And we could call that family member back and say, ma'am, I've looked into this and I want you to know he does in fact have an appointment. I can't tell you when, but it is soon and it's near. But he does have an appointment. Or, education is another big one. I want to make sure that, my son's there. I want to make sure he gets a GED. Well, yes, ma'am. As they come in, the first thing we do is enroll them in a GED program if they don't have a diploma.
Right.
Dealing with specific issues one at a time is the best way to go. If you call with, a plethora of concerns from security through classification, through education, mental health, all the way through, it's going to take time for us to get those answers from each department to find out, to get a big picture of everything before we can actually discuss anything with you. Whereas, specific, agendas, whether it's mental health, education, whatever the case is, we can at least get to that department and get you an answer a little bit quicker. So,
Right.
my advice is to try to understand that, I don't run every department on the facility. You have managers and department heads for those, for those departments. So, I have to get with them to get these answers. So, understand, when I say that, being objective to policies and procedures in a way and understanding on how an actual penitentiary works. It's not just a one person catch all. It's a multitude of departments that come together for a common goal.
Yeah, and sometimes the effort to want to fast track it because you got your loved one who's impulsive and now they push it on you and you're impulsive. I mean, if it gets to a point where I feel the matter is not properly looked into and you're rushing me, I'm probably going to say, I'll look into it. I want the answer. Then I'm going to say no. No to me, unless obviously there's always situational stuff, but no to me has always been, it stops things for me. I'm going to figure it out. I don't have an answer now, but you got to give me time. There are certain things where, let's say it's cold out, inmate needs a blanket, right? We're not going to ignore that. Hey, does he have a blanket? He never told me he needed one. Can you just check, Gangi? He doesn't. Okay, give him one, but let him know next time he has that concern to go to you. Okay, so I'm not going to leave the guy cold either, but I'm also going to let the officer tell him, hey, because if I was the officer, I'd also be a little upset. Hey, you didn't tell me any of this. Well, no, tell me next time because that's my job to get you one. Because, you got your family here thinking that I'm denying you stuff when I didn't even know. So you're not telling me. And some people may say, well, they should know. Guys, you got hundreds of people coming in a day. Unfortunately, property could get mixed up. I mean, it happens. But if you're not utilizing the chain of command where the concern is most immediate, well, the problem is it's harder to fix it. So that's another thing. You're going to spend more effort making a phone call on the back end. And when actuality, that inmate could spend less effort right in the moment when it happens and solve it right then. Solve it right then when it's happening and not hours later because they don't want to go through the chain of command. And I want to mention something about the chain of convenience too. So if you start getting that loved one who constantly has concerns, is not addressing it through the chain, I could picture you not wanting to take the phone call, but you have to take the phone call. And it's like, you know what? I just want this person to stop calling. I'm going to call admin because it's not so much about doing it for the individual's sake. You're also doing it for you because you got a life to live and this person's not going to stop calling. I already opened up the Pandora's box. I got to get this solved. So administration or whatever, we're trying to work with you and it's not the answer that you want. Well, I'm going to go call a senator. I'm going to call, okay, well, now they're not going to want to take your phone call. So they're going to try to be a little convenient too. And they're going to be like, oh, well, you know what? I don't want to keep on taking this woman's phone call, keeps on calling about her son. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and call the facility and we're going to go ahead and tell them, can you handle it? And the facility is going to come back and say, are you telling us to violate policy? Because that's what you're telling us to do. And usually they don't really want to get involved with operations. What they'll do is, can you give me an update as to what's happening? And as long as you're able to explain what's happening, it's legit. It's a done deal. They're not going to truly get involved with operations. And if you have a good, strong executive staff and administrative team, they're going to let that person know, hey, listen, I know they're one of the people that you represent, but if I do that, I got to do that for the other 2,400 that I have here. So are you willing to put your name on that can open up a Pandora's box? No, just give me the details, what's happening. I'll go ahead and explain the family and be done with it. So it's funny because everybody that's doing this makes it look like they're doing it for their loved one, but most of the time they're doing it because they don't want the phone call anymore. Let's be honest. You know, I'm doing stuff in my life. This person's calling me constantly over stuff that, why can't he just handle it there? Now I'm desperate. I call the facility, and then you wind up calling the elected representative who's like, who's this calling me again? Joe? Man, Joe's called me 6 times to get, you know what? Tell Joe I'm going to reach out to the facility, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, hey, if everybody could just stand their ground, we wouldn't be in this desperate mode where, you know, and it really does start with telling the person there in the facility, have you handled it through the right measures, and tell me what you did? Because then what I would do is this: if I was a family, my loved one has said, they've written this up 20 times. Can you tell me if any of these concerns have been sent your way? Let me check. No, they haven't. Okay. Well, now, depending on the concern, if it's a medical concern, I'll say, listen, I'll have him seen by medical, but just do me a favor. Tell him next time to write these things up because he haven't. Okay, I'll talk to him. You said it wasn't there, but will you have him seen by medical? Yes, I'll have him seen this time, but please, long-term wise, tell him that's the route he's got to take. And usually there's a level of empowerment there, and that works well. But if it's something like superficial, like, my TV broke, okay, did they go? No. Okay, so ma'am, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell him, at this point, we'll look into it because I'll whatever, but I would advise next time, because this is the only time I'm going to do it, is next time he goes ahead and follows the right chain of command, because we can't keep doing this, man, because once he does this, everybody else is going to know, and then we're going to start getting overwhelmed with phone calls. And at this point here, just that simple yes is going to overburden us to and most of the time when I do go to solve the matter, I'm not really doing it for the inmate. I'm doing it for the family who just is overburdened with the phone calls. So what I tend to do is I want to help them long term. So what I'll do is, ma'am, I'm going to help you for today because I know you're under a lot of stress. So I'll help you for today. But then do me a favor. Since I told you that he's not going through the routes, or she's not going through the routes in the facility, help yourself by telling him this is what has to be done, and hold true to it so he stops calling you. Because here's another thing. If I help you, I'm also empowering him to keep on calling you. Let's be honest. So it's not like I'm being an asshole by saying, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm actually more concerned about how your time is spent. I hear you have 2 kids. And he called you how many times today? So you know what I'll do, man? Maybe not to be an ass, because the person's going to keep on calling you. Maybe, not to be rude, but maybe I'll shut you down so he'll stop calling you, because he'll realize that this matter isn't working, and that will start moving him to where he needs to be. And I think that's really out of fairness to the family member, who I'm sure has got a lot of worries on the outside they have to deal with. But I hope this answered their questions, the person that recommended this. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say? I thought this was a good dialogue. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. It was a good dialogue. For the family members, get as much information as you can when they call. If they call you saying that they're not getting this or not getting that, not ask them, who did they talk to? Get names of people they've talked to. Did you talk to the officer? Yeah. Well, did you talk to the sergeant? Well, no. Why not? This way, when you call us and say, okay, well, this officer spoke to officer so-and-so, Sergeant Gangi, Lieutenant Pomponio, that not only helps y'all, but it helps us accountability wise. Cause then I can go to Gangi and say, okay, Gangi, did you talk about this issue? Well, yeah.
Well said.
Have you done anything about it? That helps me hold my people accountable as much as you want to hold your loved one accountable in prison. It's our job to hold them both accountable. So get as much information from them. Make sure they've talked to everybody in the chain of command. If not, turn them back to the chain of command, because 80% of issues that they're calling you about can be solved by utilizing chain of command.
And Joe, can I compliment something? Because what you said was so spot on. You're right.
Sure.
Also, telling the inmate to remember the names. I mean, I spoke to medical. Well, who? Just a nurse. Who? Because now you're right. It's going to help the family to help us solve the matter. Or it's funny. The officer, my unit officer did this. What's his name? I don't know their name. That's your 5-day unit officer. It is your responsibility to know their name. I'm Absolutely. Sorry. If you really, so you're telling me your family knows more about who's running your unit than you do. No, it's just because, maybe you're telling a far-fetched story. But as I would tell my loved one, you don't know the name of the officer that works there every day or the officer you're interacting with. You know how you're on the street, you get pulled over and someone quick say, "What's your name, officer? What's your badge number?" We have our name right on our thing. If there's an interaction that person didn't like, what's the officer's name? Well, I don't know their name. Okay, well then I'm sorry. If you don't know their name, what do you want me to do? Do your research. So I'm not spending all the time chasing after it. And then I can then give that information over to administration, who now we're not scrambling their specifics. And like Joe said, names matter, because that gives us a tremendous starting point of where we're looking at, and not like, oh, this happened when? Sometime last month. What time? Sometime during the day. By who? 3 people, I don't remember their name. Well, administration, you need to look into that. How? If that was a concern, you should go back to your level and say, I'm sorry, but be more specific. What are they? Because I'm not, again, nothing's 100%, but listen, guys, people lie in generalities. You got to force them to be specific, because it's easier to lie in generalities. And most times people accept it. Well, it had to happen, but he never gave you any names. He never told you when. And then you're trying to tell us, well, we got to figure it out. You want us to look through hours upon hours of footage and all this other stuff, when the person has access at that time to see who's on that unit, who it was, look at the clock, look at the time. I mean, literally document whatever it is, even if it's in their head, and then when they get back to there, they could write down what it is. But that was a good point, Joe. 100%. That was something that hopefully people stay to the end of this to pick that up. That was good.
Yeah, definitely. Names definitely matter. Like I said, it helps us, in the accountability process, regardless whether it's the offender or my staff. And secondly, if you're asking those questions of your loved one, your loved one's going to understand that, you want the information. Therefore, maybe their manipulation process and utilizing family members for an instant result is not working to their plan. It's just a better process for all. And it eases the burden for you guys, and understand that, we're going to solve the problem one way or the other. But information and names are the best thing to start with. And, understand that we're going to give them everything and anything that, they're entitled to have, unless they're on some sort of restriction. And, we want to be there to solve those problems. But like I said, sometimes the problem solving is not always going to be instantaneous. So, be patient and understand that, we are there for the family members just as much as we are for the offenders.
Yeah. And again, patience key. Sometimes you feed off the impulsiveness of the inmate, and then you stray our relationship when we try to communicate. It's like, hold on, ma'am. I mean, this isn't emergent. So try not to, all of a sudden call us with that same energy that person treated you with, because we're trying to resolve the matter. And I think, if anything, we're the best ways to do it more long-term. Let's work together. So I thought it was a good dialogue. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And don't forget, if you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.